since there's no Michael and I have a soft voice, I want to sit and stay in the middle of the room so that both sides can hear me. Can you hear me? How about you? Okay, I try to speak louder. And thank you. And I'm so glad to be here to share with all of you about the assessment, especially about how to design rubrics. And I'm sure you are here because you are either interested in the assessment or you have been involved in the assessment. And from my experience, I really think rubrics is very important part of assessment process, and you will hear later about this, how important it is. So first, before I present, I want to, I want to give acknowledgement to those individuals. And the first one is Carol Myford, and she is a professor in the College of Education at UIC, and she provides a lot of information about assessment. And I use some of her work for this workshop. And the other two are the authors of two books which I use for my class in the College of Education at UIC. So I use a lot of information from those two books, and so I want to give them an acknowledgement first. So for this workshop, I expect at the end of this workshop, you will have you will meet those objectives. This is what we always do, right? For workshop, for assessment, we always set up our expectations for any kind of, training. So I hope you will be able to define what is a rubric and explain the benefits of the rubric. And also you will identify situations where a rubric is useful. And also gain some knowledge about different kinds of rubrics, and also be able, if we have time, I would like you to practice it. All right? So in terms of assessment, we all know, and this is the process. And so based on a learning outcome, the first thing we want to do is to gather information about how students are doing, achieving the program learning outcome. And then we will synthesize the information and then make evaluation, make interpretation of the information. And based on that interpretation, we make decision about the curriculum, about teaching, and so on and so forth. So for the first steps, to gather information, and what should we do? We need to do testing, right? We need to, testing is a systematic process, and we need to use this process to gather information about how students are achieving the learning outcome and are learning. So once we administer tests, and all kinds of tests, I'm going to talk about all different kinds of assessment methods later on. And so we have assessment results, either writing sample or like a test results or a project. So once we have assessment results, we need to measure it. We need to assign a score. And we need to quantify it so that we can make a judgment. So we need to give a number or assign point to a product, to a performance, to a project. So once after we quantify the students' work, then we will be able to evaluate the quality of the work. This is the three important steps of assessment process. And so in terms of assessment methods, and there are all kinds of assessment methods we have been using, in our teaching and learning process. And mainly, I think these are the three major categories. And the first category is the selection supply, and such as, like, for instance, multiple choice. You just make a selection, and the answer's there, and you just make a selection. Try to choose a correct answer. And sometimes supply items is very short, like you just need to supply one word or two words, to answer the questions. And this type of assessment method is very often used in K through 12, probably not so much in higher ed. And the other two very much used in higher education. And the second one, the big group, is called product-based assessment. We ask students to write an essay, write a report, write a paper, and do a portfolio and write a thesis, for graduate, programs. So those we call they are product-based assessment methods. Then another big category is called performance-based. And it is also, this kind of method is also used in higher education and frequently, like experiment, students do experiment in the lab and do a music performance and the debate presentation, and also sometimes we even observe students' behaviors, So, and just think about this performance-based, and in order to assess, to quantify and those students' performance, we need to do through observation, right? So even then for the second category, product-based, students produce a product, then we are going to evaluate the product. So in terms of scoring methods, basically I group them into these two categories. Like for supply and selection test, we can just assign points based on correct answer, right? Those for multiple choice, we can just, if answer is correct, just give 1. If not correct, just no point. That's very easy to score. But for the second two major category of assessment methods, performance-based and product-based, and we need to assign points based on a rubric. And in reality, I should say, and a lot of instructors, they do assign, when you deal with those like papers, essays, and also student performance, you probably have something in your mind already, just not formally put it into a rubric format. So what I'm going to show you about, how to put, your expectation, your scoring, methods into a formal rubric format. So now we know what is a rubric. It is a scoring guide, right? So it helps us to score students' performance products. And in order for us to score students' performance product, we need to have our expectations, set our criteria. So the rubric should have a set of clear expectation and criteria. And also we know that not all the students will perform at a high level, right? And there is a lot of variability among students' performance. Then we should be able to judge different kind of level of performance. So we want to set up different levels, of the performance for meeting the criteria. So Rubrics basically is a scoring guide, has a clear set of expectations or criteria, and with all levels, score points defined and described. So what's the benefits of rubric? And sometimes, like it's as a teacher, you have different kinds of students. So if you have a rubric, it will reduce your subjectivity. When you score students' samples work, you just base on the rubrics. And not think about whether he is my favorite student or he's not my favorite student, right? Sometimes, these kind of factors, counted towards your scoring, right? Your grading, So with a rubric, you can just disregard, and all kinds of other factors. Just focus on their academic performance. Based on rubric, you provide the scoring, results. So the rubric can help, to reduce subjectivity and increase reliability. And also sometimes, if like students' work will be scored by several instructors, several faculty members, especially for, I think, like maybe not, like for the basic, like English 101 class, and you may have, gather students' writing sample and have a group of faculty to score the students' essay. Then if we can follow the same rubric, so the scoring will be more consistent. right? So it will not, to reduce, different subjectivity into the scoring process. And on the other hand, if you can provide a rubric to your students, and the students know what they are expected to meet, and so that will help their learning process. So in my class in the past, I always provide my expectation, my rubrics to my students. So I say you can do your evaluation before you even submit your paper your project to me. Based on rubric, do your self-evaluation, see whether you meet the criteria or not. If not, you have a chance to revise it yourself. So the rubric can really help students also. So we know that, why we need to use rubrics, because of it's determined by the kinds of assessment methods we use, right? If we use performance-based assessment methods, if we use product-based assessment methods, then we need to have rubrics to score the results, assessment results. Then what influences our decision to choose assessment methods is the learning outcome. It depends on what kind of learning outcome, then we want to make sure assessment methods are appropriate for the learning outcome. And the learning outcome is the core of this process. So learning outcome drives assessment methods drives scoring methods. So this is the relationship between these three major components of assessment process. So what kind of situation, what kind of learning outcome which where we will influence our decision to use rubrics? So let's look at the learning outcome. I will have examples immediately. So for this kind of learning outcome with this kind of characteristics, and so they are skill-based because students are going to perform and probably in a real situation, in a realistic situation, skill-based, and also the instructor going to observe their performance. So, and also those learning outcome, the learning outcome will focus on actual performance of tasks in real settings. And also the learning outcome would likely result in a product then to be evaluated. And also the learning outcome will focus on students' affective and domain characteristics like feelings, value, attitude, behaviors. Because those kind of learning, students' performance is, need to be observed. So in this kind of situation, we need to use the rubrics. So now I found some examples from DePaul, program, and the learning outcomes from DePaul's programs. Let's look at this learning outcome. What kind of assessment method we are going to use to assess students achieving this learning outcome? It will be performance, right? Musical performance. So it is performance-based. So to evaluate performance-based assessment results, what should we do? So we need to observe, we need to score the performance in a realistic situation, right? So for this kind of assessment method, we need to use rubrics. So now let's look at this one. So we need to observe, nursing students' performance in the real situation, right? Students are going to apply their nursing concept and theories and the research in the family-centered, community-based practice of professional nursing care and case management. So they're probably going to do rotation internship, and their clinical coordinators or preceptors going to observe their performance and evaluate their performance. So in this kind of situation, we need the rubrics to evaluate. And how about this one? Very obviously, students are going to write a paper, write an essay. It's a product. So, and as you know, essay is a very, it has a multiple complex dimensions, right? So it's not like a multiple choice. You just have correct one correct answer. So this has multiple dimensions. Then we need to set up rubrics to evaluate it. And also, how about this example? And all these learning outcomes I got from your programs, and also this one is from your university counseling service. And so they are going to examine students' attitude change and the behavior change. So these kind of learning outcomes, will drive the determined kinds of learning assessment methods we are going to use. And because of these kinds of methods, then we decide we need to use rubric to evaluate students, to score the students' assessment results. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm always playing devil's advocate, but so you made an interesting argument for trying to eliminate subjectivity. So I don't disagree with that. I just think objectivity is important when all students are the same. When all students are not the same, subjectivity becomes actually a valuable commodity, not a negative. So could you give an example of a rubric that allows flexibility and yet still maintains clarity for the students to see what the expectations are?
Yeah, rubrics is like, I can say, is a guide, right? And sometimes, you can define, like criteria levels. And as we all know, there are all kinds of behaviors among students. Sometimes I've noticed myself, there's no clear, level to fit this kind of assessment, behaviors. It happens very often it happens. So if this kind of situation happens, you just learn from your experience, you adjust your rubric. And this is because rubrics, you can develop your rubrics based on what you have known already. And so I'm going to talk about how to write rubrics later on. Then sometimes the rubric you develop does not fit. It happens. Because students behave different. This class of students behave this way. Another class of students behave the other way, and so this is something we talk about called pre-assessment. When you have a group of students in your class, you need to assess their ability before they take your class. Right? You need to see what their level they are, and then you make your adjustment. Even for rubrics, So you design rubrics based on your knowledge experience of your previous students. And your future students may have different kind of behaviors, levels. At that time, then you need to do self-evaluation yourselves and then adjust your rubric. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to introduce several major rubrics we used in assessment. And I'm going to talk about holistic method rubric and analytic rubrics. Have you heard about that? Yeah. Okay. And then, general versus, task specific and developmental, which you use very often at DePaul University, right? And then also I'm going to talk about the other types, which are not called rubrics, but it's similar, the method is similar. We call it like checklists, rating scales. Scales is similar like rubrics, is a guide you use to score students' performance. And the holistic rubric, and it's a single rubric. And like for instance, if you want to write, evaluate, score a writing, sample, you want to assess a student's writing ability based on the sample. So you will develop the criteria, and then also different level. Level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3 probably is the highest level, based on the criteria you have in your mind. Maybe when you look at a writing sample, you want to think about how they, their ideas, whether their ideas, expressed, to address the topic. Then you also want to think about, how they organize ideas. This is organization. Then you want to think about how they choose the words, choice of words, whether it's words appropriate or not. But for holistic rubrics, you have all those components combined. Then you just provide like, say like for level 3, and they meet all these 3, in dimensions. Then for level 2, they maybe meet 2 of those 3 dimensions, And for level 1, they did not meet any of these. So the rubric, it just gives you like single score, either 1, 2, 3. Students just get 1 score. And so the analytics rubric is different. So it is like, for instance, for each component of a writing sample, you have a score. You have a rubric for ideas, you have a rubric for organization, and also you have a rubric for word choice. And so each of these has its own advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at those. And before we look at the advantages and disadvantages, I just want to show you an example of holistic rubrics and also example of analytic rubrics. Again, this is based on the learning outcome we just saw, from the music program at DePaul University. So for this learning outcome, it's very obvious. In the learning outcome itself, it already set up the criteria. Students need to perform with accepted tone quality. So tone quality is an important aspect. And the pitch and rhythmic accuracy, dynamic control, articulation, and expressiveness. So when an instructor observes students' performance, they will pay attention to those areas, right? So for a holistic rubrics, so we can include all those components, all those dimensions, all those criteria. Then for level 3, I should say, student which we consider acceptable. And we say students demonstrate excellent performance in all of this, in all of the following, in those tone quality, pitch and rhythmic accuracy, dynamic control, articulation, expressiveness. So students perform perfect in all those 3 areas. Then for level 2, we should say students have demonstrate good performance in most of those criteria. And the level 1, we can say students show poor performance in most of those criteria. So this is holistic. You just put all the criteria together and for each level. And the advantage of holistic rubric is that you can get a quick snapshot about how students perform. In this case, if students get a level 3, you say overall students perform perfect, and meet all those criteria and characteristics. And so you can get a quick idea about how that students performed. And also it is most efficient, which means you can score students quickly. And compare with analytic rubrics, it will take much more time. So it's a single score. So this advantage is that and I can go back here. For instance, in this case, if 2 students all receive level 2, if one student received level 2, maybe because that student did not do well for expressiveness, and another student got level 2 scores, maybe that student did not do very well in articulation. But for those 2 students, they all receive level 2 scores. They don't know which part is their strengths, which part is their weaknesses. They don't know that. That's the disadvantage of holistic rubric. Yeah. So students don't know that cannot get feedback. They don't know how they can improve themselves. They only know I'm not so well. I only have level 2. I'm not at level 3. But they did not know which part of performance I did not do well. So that's the disadvantage of a holistic rubric. Now, this is the example for analytic rubric. And in this situation, we just put all those traits, dimensions on one side. Then for each of these criteria expectation, and we have set up 3 levels. The first level is not acceptable. Second is partial acceptable, and the third is acceptable. Then since I'm not expert in this area, so I did not, I don't want to, misleading you. So I just say description for level 1, description for level 2, description for level 3. Do we have any faculty member here who teaches music? Yes. Yes, probably you can say, for instance, tone quality. For level 1, not acceptable, what kind of behavior would be?
Sure, it's something unpleasing, that it's just not nice to hear.
Yeah, so level 1 is unpleasing, right? So how about level 2?
Tone production is okay, it's pleasing, but it's not full. It's not a full sound.
And how about level 3?
Full sound, and it's pleasing.
So you see, so you define, the kind of performance for each level for each of the, area, each of the, criteria. So the advantage of this rubric, as we say, is to overcome the disadvantage of holistic rubric. And this way, if one student, let me just go up. If 2 students, they all receive 2 for holistic scoring, based on holistic scoring rubrics, this time they are able to see what is their strengths and weaknesses. Like one student may receive, all 2 for except, they receive 1 for, let's say, tone quality, unpleasing, So then the student know this is the area I need to make improvement. And so another student received, 2 for holistic scoring, and using holistic scoring method, and meet all the criteria except, dynamic control. So this time, for the dynamic control may receive like level 1. So this time the student know how to improve himself or herself. So that's the advantage and the beauty of analytic rubric. So it helps students to better understand the nature of their quality work and their strengths and weaknesses. Also, it has disadvantage. Nothing is perfect. Everything is relative, right? You have advantage and disadvantage. So, you have to score students' work for each of the dimension and for each of the level. It's very time consuming. It takes a lot of time. And so that's the disadvantage of analytic rubric. Especially, if you have like large scale assessment, you don't want to do this. It's too much, labor, resources, to be involved. And then the another one is called generic rubric. And it is, the format is similar as it's just concept. And sometimes you want to develop rubrics which can be used across, the different tasks. For instance, the rubric we developed for music, it probably can be used to measure, student performance, whether they perform piano, violin, or, guitar, or so you just based on the tone, rhythm, and expressiveness. Probably, this kind of rubrics will be useful across all different kinds of instrument and performance. Is that right? So like as a department head, and I have my, piano major. I have, guitar major, and also I have, another program like violin. And so using these rubrics, I will be able to see whether students in the violin program perform better than students in the piano programs. because they are using the same rubrics. So I can make that kind of comparison. This is what we call the generic, and the rubric can be used for different tasks. Another one is called the task-specific rubrics. So this kind of rubric is designed only for one particular task. For instance, we can provide, if we want to just say, to evaluate how students play violin. So we can develop, we think about what kind of important technique students need to achieve, for violin performance. So we can develop that kind of rubrics, which is very task-specific. So this kind of rubric can only use to measure students' violin performance, cannot be used students' piano performance, right? So this is called the task-specific rubrics. And this is just a concept, Then another one is called the developmental rubric, which is used very often. This rubric is usually used to monitor students' development process, and cognitive development, and psychological development, and development of a task. And so to monitor their progress, you are not going to evaluate their end product, their highest performance. You want to evaluate their progress. And very often, sometimes this rubric can be used to measure the same student, several times throughout the year. And recently, I have been involved in a project and in the College of Education, UIC, and they are going to, to evaluate, teachers' identity change. And so they developed this kind of rubric. And they want to see how teachers change from teacher-centered instructor to student-centered, then to be action research. And of course, they provide some of the training to students. They videotape. They did 3 videotapes. And they use the same rubrics to evaluate those 3 videotapes. So the results shows, the first videotape shows, most of them, teach, more teacher-centered, provide instruction more teacher-centered. And then the second videotape results shows, and they have changed, and some of them become more student-centered, and, and the results for the last videotape shows, they become, they not only become more student-centered, teachers, they also become to evaluate their own teaching. It becomes teacher research themselves in the classroom. So developmental rubric, if you in at DePaul, sometimes you I think your university counseling service that has a rubric. They're used to use the rubric to evaluate students, attitude change, right? So this kind of rubric you probably can be used several times to evaluate the same student. Then you will see their progress after your service, see whether they perform better, So this is, and in terms of format, developmental rubric, generic rubric, and task-specific rubric is similar to holistic and analytic. This is the same kind of format. So now let's talk about how to write rubrics. And those are the 3 major steps. First, you have to set up performance criteria, obviously, right? You want to measure against those criteria. And then the next, once we have the criteria, next things we need to know is that we know that students won't perform the same level. Then we want to be able to judge students' different level of performance. So we need to determine the scoring points. And then once we decide if we want to say students will have 3 level performance, we need to be able to define that, to describe, to the kind of performance level. Just like what Daniel just talked about, for tone, right? So the first level is not pleasing. The second level was okay, and the third level is pleasing. So you need to write definition for each level. So let's look at each steps. So the first step is to to identify performance criteria. And so for performance criteria, we know that we need to list important features, characteristics, and the criteria, and which we want students to achieve, to perform, to demonstrate. So when we identify those important elements, we can ask ourselves, what do I want my students to demonstrate from carrying out this project and from doing this work? I need to think about that, right? And so the second question, I just think, we will think about, what high quality work it will look like. For instance, like this music performance for tone quality. So we think the highest performance should be, the sound is very pleasing, right? So we think about, those kind of, question. This kind of question will help we brainstorm within ourselves what kind of features, characteristic elements, criteria we want the student to demonstrate from this work, and helps to set up expectation. And once we have this list of performance expectation of criteria, now the second step we are going to decide the points. And usually this is just common sense. Normal, you don't want to have a level more than 7. It's too much, So the difference between each level, it will be very minor sometimes, So usually you don't want to, very often people just have 3 levels, maybe 4 levels, and 5 level used most frequently. 6 level and 7 level very rare, it's too much. So you think about already, then how can we decide how many levels we want? And sometimes just based on experience, just like I answer his question. So for instance, if I have a group, a student's work, and I can sort them through, and for instance, I have 20 papers. Then I read each of them. I will sort them. I say, this paper should be in this folder, and that paper should be in this folder, and that paper should be in that folder, right? Based on my feeling about each of the the work, the student sample work. Then once I sort them through, so I pretty much divide level, and so I'm synthesizing work and I group them, and then I think about for the sample work in this group, what kind of features, characteristics, what kind of performance, and for the second, what kind. And so in this way, you kind of develop the realistic levels based on students' actual work. So now we have the level. We know the scoring points, and then we just need to describe each level. And so usually what we do is that we know obviously what's the lowest level performance look like, and what's the highest level of performance look like. Then also in between, we talk about something in between, So this is the way we're going to, describe the level of performance to define it. Of course, and one advice is to, try to use a clear language, because, this rubric probably will be used by other people. The clearer, the less, subjectivity and errors will, other instructor will make. And also I want to talk about, so just now we talk about, the different kinds of rubrics and also how to write rubrics. Do you have any questions at this point? Is it clear? Okay, all right. So then sometimes, we don't want to develop a rubric. We just want to do a checklist, like for, we just say whether students did it or not, did not do it, or whether they they perform or did not perform, whether they meet, they met the outcome or did not meet the outcome. So this is what we call checklist. Do you use checklist? Do you use your check? Probably, it is very often used, you just want to check whether they did the work or did not do work, you are not going to check their level. And you're not going to assess the level. You are going to check whether they did something or not. So here's an example, it's again based on outcome in one of the programs. Here is a BS in chemistry. And so the outcomes say, students will be able to design and carry out chemical experiments, record data, and analyze data. So now we can develop a checklist, see whether they did it. And if students design a chemical experiment, we give a check. Student did it. They conduct experiment, again we check. And they record experiment data, then we check. And they may record data, they did not analyze the data, then we just do not give a check. And then they may, because they did not analyze the data, they did not interpret data, we just did not get a check. So just through this, we can quickly get a snapshot of how students meet this learning outcome. Right? And checklist is easy to develop because it has no level. It's just this, you just list a list of criteria, then just make your judgment based on students' performance. But sometimes, you say, I probably there's another format. There's no a certain format. You can use different kinds of format. I just show you another format like this situation. You just can say, whether students performed or not performed this task. Yes.
For a checklist like this, would it be a good idea or not to put a third category in there, kind of middle of the road? Something?
That's what I'm getting. Yeah,
Okay.
you just help me to move to the next level. Yeah, sometimes you just don't want to say whether they did it or not. Did not do it. You want to say how well they did, right? And this is what we can use called rating scales. And so you allow observers to judge performance along a continuum rather than just a dichotomy, just like what you just mentioned. Not they did it, not did it. You want to see how they did along this, horizontal line. And there are three commonly used, rating scales. The first one called numerical, and then graphic, and the last one is called descriptive graphic. Now let's look at the example first. So in this case, like for for this particular element of the checklist is the carry out chemical experiment. So the question is that we want to find out to what degree the student carry out chemical instrument. And so we provide the direction there. Say indicate the degree to which this student carries out chemical instrument by circling the appropriate number. The number represents the following rules. 3 equal performs very well, 2 equal performs well, and 1 equal performs poorly. So you have this, and the guidelines already. Then it's easy. You just circle the number based on students' performance, right? Did this answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, sure. And there's another format, for okay. Let me move up. So you can summarize the characteristics of the numerical rubric rating scale already. And this is just summary of the numerical rating scale. So just have a number, then you just circle a number to make your judgment about students' performance. And this is another kind of rating scale called a graphic. And So you just write your words under the horizontal line, and so again the question is to what extent the student carry out a chemical experiment. So instead of circle the number, you see actually different different level along this horizontal line, and on one end is poorly, on the other end is very well, then in the middle is well. Then you do not need to just choose one of them. You can put like a check mark and X along this horizontal line. You can be sometimes like in the middle of very well and well. For maybe this kind of address your question earlier, and you will more observe some of the behaviors does not fit exactly to each level of the rubric. So this horizontal line allow you to check students' performance based on this criteria. So you can put a check anywhere along this horizontal line to really show exactly what you feel about the students' level of performance. This is what we call the graphic rating scale. And it could be used for developmental assessment, and also, you want to see the developmental, this is where they are in terms of the process, in the level of growth. And this slide summarizes the characteristics of graphic rating scales. And another example is what is called the descriptive graphic rating scales. So it just provides more descriptive, information about each level of the performance along this horizontal line. So for instance, in this case, we want to know to what extent does the students follow the safety procedure while carrying out chemical experiments. So we will say on one hand, they consistently follows the rule, the procedures. On the other hand, they never follows the procedures. And in the middle, they generally follows, but needs improvement. And then also between never follows and general follows, we can say sometimes they follows. Again, when you evaluate students, you can just put your check mark or the X, along this horizontal line, anywhere along this, between these two ends, So this is another example of descriptive graphic rating. Another example of rating scale. And so I just now talk about what is a rubric and why we need to use the rubrics, and introduce some rubrics format, and also how to write it, and some of other like rating scale which will be useful. So I think we still have about 30 minutes, and if you are interested, and I think it's time to practice. And you can work in group and form your own group. Then just think about one learning outcome, and that will result a product or performance. Just think about it. Or you can use some of the example here in the slides, those learning outcome. Then also think about the brainstorm. What kind of performance criteria you expect students to demonstrate from their work? You can just do maybe 2 or 3, and rubrics, the criteria. Just it's just a practice. Then you decide, which one you are going to use. Are you going to do a holistic one? Are you going to do analytical one? And are you going to use checklist or one of the rating scales? You just choose one of them. And then you, now since you have the criteria and you know which one you want to do, to use and to build, And then you determine the number of scoring points. Then you just define it. And is it doable? And you can form your own group. And then you can, right now it's 2 o'clock. And so how about I give you 15 minutes? And after that, do you want to share among all of you? Yeah, and we can share, you know. So like the group, you can select a representative to present your rubric. Then also the rest of the group can critique and their rubrics. All right? Let's do it.